Joining me now is Senator Brent Taylor. He is my state senator. He represents part of the town I live in, Collierville, or maybe all of the town of Collierville, but also other areas as well. We're also going to talk about some interesting things from a historical standpoint. But maybe we'll just start with that so folks can get to know a little bit about you. Because you're a mortician by training, right?
That's right. I'm
funeral director.
Funeral director. I'm an undertaker by profession. And as you know, there are only two things that are certain in life, death and taxes, and I got a little something to do with both. As a matter of fact, I'm opposed to both personally. I'm opposed to taxes, and personally, I'm opposed to death. I don't want to be a part of that until I have to.
Right, exactly. Well, you are in a line of work that you never ran out of customers. Right.
Death rate, Brent, is 100%.
It is 100%, isn't it? So are you still in that business?
No, I sold my companies. I had a chain of funeral homes scattered in Tennessee and Mississippi. I sold them about 3 years ago. And I sold in January of 22. I had no idea what I was going to do. And then my predecessor in the Senate decided he was not going to run again. And so I had a bunch of people ask me to run for the Senate because I had previously served on the city council in Memphis and on our county commission. And so I had people ask me to run for the Senate. I did, and it worked out well because I never got seller's remorse for selling a funeral home because I got busy campaigning, and then I won and been busy serving the good people of Memphis. And so I'm sure they made changes at the funeral home that I would have liked to have been a part of, but they made them anyway.
Oh, you got a different calling.
That's right.
All right. So I want to go to some history, though, because of the fact that you are licensed undertaker, mortician, you were able to take part in something very interesting, and you're even writing a book on it. Tell our audience about that.
I am. General Nathan Bedford Forrest, the Civil War general, was from Memphis, and he died here in Memphis in 1877. He was buried at historic Elmwood Cemetery, which was the old historic cemetery all Memphians were buried in back in the day. And then around the turn of the century, some remaining Confederate veterans decided that they wanted to disinter him from Elmwood Cemetery and relocate him to a city park that had become known as Forest Park, named after General Forrest. And he remained there from 1903 until just a couple of years ago when a group of African Americans who had acquired the park wanted to have him disinterred and moved elsewhere. And ultimately, the law says that you have to have a licensed funeral director to do a disinterment and handling of remains. And I was the only funeral director that was acceptable to everybody involved, the Forrest family, the African-American group that owned the park, and the Sons of Confederate Veterans. So I undertook on about a 9-month project of disinterring General Forrest, his wife, sheltering their remains for about 3 months, and then ultimately reburying them in Columbia, Tennessee, at the Museum of the Sons of Confederate Veterans. And so I've written a book about that whole experience, and I kind of go back all the way back in the mid-'90s when I was on the city council, and there were these pushes then to have him moved. Now I'll just share one of them with you. The first African-American mayor of Memphis was a gentleman by the name of Willie Harrington.
Oh yeah,
Mayor Harrington.
I remember him.
And Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson came to town. They were going to have a rally at Forest Park to remove. They wanted to try to, get him and his wife moved someplace else. And Mayor Harrington wouldn't go to the rally. And so Jesse Jackson went to the mayor and said, Mayor, Al Sharpton would really like for you to come to this rally. And Mayor Harrington told him, he said, I tell you what, I'm not going to have any part of moving any dead people. And Al Sharpton needs to go back to New York and tell Mayor Giuliani how to run New York because I run Memphis. And as long as Harrington was mayor, there was never any serious discussion about removing General Forrest. Ultimately, they did. I did the work, and I've written a book about that whole experience.
And when will that be out?
Well, hopefully sometime toward the end of the year, first of next year was when I'd like for it to come out. I will tell you, if you've never written a book, it's the hardest thing you'll ever do, particularly for somebody that was not that good in school. If it wasn't for summer school, I would still be there. And so it was quite the undertaking for me to write a book.
So people should just be watching in 2026, Senator Taylor will have a book out. And what's it going to be called?
The name of the book is Digging Up Bones, My Journey Through the Many Burials of General Nathan
The
Bedford
mini
Forrest.
burials. Poor guy's been dug up and buried, what, 3 times?
4 times.
4
actually.
times.
Yeah. He was at Elmwood. Then they moved him to Forest Park. And then I temporarily buried him in one of my cemeteries because I had to shelter his remains for about 3 months. And I didn't want him in the funeral home where gawkers could come in. So I reburied him a third time. And then we disinterred him from there to take him in for his fourth and final burial up at Columbia, Tennessee.
So what's in Columbia, Tennessee?
The Museum of the Sons of Confederate Veterans. They've got a museum up there, and that's where he and his wife are buried there.
Now, you obviously had to open the casket, right?
We did.
What'd you find?
He and his wife's caskets had long since deteriorated, and what was basically there were skeletal remains, and we removed those from the caskets they were in into permanent caskets. And we worked with the family and Sons of Confederate Veterans in a new appropriate caskets. And we actually had the measurements from his tailor from back when he was still living. And we used that, and we had a new Confederate uniform made to his specifications.
Wow. And
we did a ceremonial dressing, and we do that a lot of times when for bodies that are too badly decomposed. We'll do a ceremonial dressing, which is basically laying the clothes out on whatever remains laid out like they would have worn them in life. And so we did that, both he and his wife.
Now, are you saying that his skeletal remains were seen by people?
Only me and my staff.
Okay.
And the only ones that saw his skeletal remains. And then there were artifacts we found, and the family, we worked with the family and cataloged those artifacts, and the family ultimately made the decision they wanted those artifacts reburied with them.
Are we talking about medals or what?
Yeah, it was buttons, shirt buttons, suspender buttons, boot heels. There were things like that. The uniform was just about all gone. You could find a few fragments of the uniform that had survived, but mainly it was buttons. And we looked for, he had been shot. And we looked for a bullet, but we were never able to find the bullet. Mainly just
that was how he died.
No, he did not. He was shot, but he didn't die from the bullet wound. He lived. He had diabetes, and ultimately died from that at a relatively young age. And he was a farmer down on President's Island now, which, as you know, President's Island now is an industrial park, a lot of heavy industrial area. But that's where he farmed after the war. And, he was in the railroad business, the insurance business, along with Jefferson Davis, who was the former president of the Confederate States. They were in the insurance business together, both in Memphis. And so Memphis, as you know, has a long, rich history.
Well, even here in Collierville, we have the Battle of Collierville right in our town square.
Right. And there's actually a monument there in town square that you kind of have to know where it is, but it's commemorating that battle.
It sure is. So when his remains, you told me off camera, I asked you about it. You didn't find a lot of him left, but you did find some. Yeah, it was
mainly skeletal remains. The only soft tissue that was left was the back of his head, which still had hair 16, 18 inches long that we were able to wash and comb and place back in the casket in the appropriate place. And so as I told people, Brent, I had a lot of people say, I can't believe you want to get involved in moving Nathan Bedford Forrest. It could be bad for business and all. And, I took the approach that if you thought Nathan Bedford Forrest was an awful human being, someone who bought and sold other people and treated human beings as chattel and sold them on the auction block, if you think that person is despicable, and you think his ought to be dug up and drug the hell out of Memphis, I'm your guy. If you think, on the other hand, that he was a brilliant Civil War tactician whose war moves are still studied today in war colleges, and he should be treated with dignity and respect, I'm your guy. So I was the one guy that was able to please everybody in that.
Oh, man. Does somebody want to let Dolly in? She's scratching at the door to get in. It's our studio dog. So even on our town square here in Collierville, a couple years ago, we had folks that showed up that wanted the removal of any monuments to the Confederates. What do you make of the desire to just erase all of our Confederate history? Thankfully, we have the monument going back in Arlington National Cemetery that was removed. Now it's coming back in. That was to the Confederates. What do you make of them trying to erase all of this?
First of all, you should never erase history. And when that battle was starting up, I even reached out to some of the city council members. And I said, look, I don't think we need to remove Nathan Bedford Forrest. I don't think we need to take the statues down. If you want to add additional statues that put Nathan Bedford Forrest and what he did in context so that people could go to that park
and make their own choice.
And make their own choice. And they can see for themselves what Nathan Bedford Forrest did pre-Civil War. And so, but I will tell you this, none of us will live up to the scrutiny 250 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
And the example I use, and I have no idea if this will happen or not, but imagine 150 years from now, they may have a way to take a cell and create the chicken and beef that we eat and be able to create that in a laboratory instead of actually having to raise animals and slaughter them. And if they were able to do that in 150 years, they'd look back and say, how awful were those people to actually raise animals only to have them slaughtered to eat them? I mean, that's just awful. So none of us will live up to the scrutiny of 150 years from now. And they're trying to judge 19th century people based on 21st century values,
mm-hmm.
and none of us will measure up in the long run.
Well, we saw that with Robert E. Lee. I was telling you off camera that we did a documentary on Robert E. Lee. We went to Arlington House there in Arlington National Cemetery, did a big documentary on him. And, you know, in many ways, he was a great also general and warrior, and his strategies. But yet also, he was a man of faith. His wife was a great person of faith. And he was a great family man. He was a great patriot. He loved his country, Virginia, as he referred to it, as they were all seen as little independent countries, right? Sovereign countries. That became the United States eventually, of course. And then
he considered himself a Virginian first.
That's exactly right.
Second.
That's exactly right. And of course, he had serious issues with Washington, D.C. and the federal government marching across Virginia to North Carolina and South Carolina and heading to do what they did there, right? But have been Virginia to South Carolina. But he didn't like the idea of crossing those boundaries and waging war over what for him was an issue of state rights. And people can make it about slavery. They can make it about state rights. I think in a lot of regards, slavery was on its way out. I think it would have been done away with eventually, thankfully. But I also think these guys were very concerned about, does a state have the right to leave the union? Is there a point in time where the federal government becomes so corrupt that they've breached their contract, which we agreed to, we entered into, we created the federal government. So what we create, can we not either abolish it or alter it or divorce from this agreement that's no longer being held? And they were having this debate. And I don't think that's been resolved yet to this day. I don't think it's been, I think Andrew Jackson, who I respect in a lot of ways, was like, I don't think, we're going to allow certain states to leave. It's one that still hasn't been resolved to this day. And I'm afraid if the country keeps going the way it's going, we're going to find ourselves right back where some states are saying this is not working and we've got too many abuses and we need a remedy.
That question has not been answered yet,
Mm-hmm.
even after the Civil War, because General Lee, Jefferson Davis, who was the president
Mm-hmm.
of the Confederacy, they were never brought up and tried for treason, mainly because that was an open question that nobody
Mm-hmm.
knew where the courts were. Because in order to make Jefferson Davis and Robert E. Lee and others traitors to the United States, you would first have to answer the question of whether or not you could actually leave. And I don't think they knew what the answer to that was going to be, so they never tried them. And so it remains, even after the bloody Civil War, we still don't know whether or not states can leave. And I tell people that serving in the state Senate has got to be, it's the best political position in the world because we're the center of the political universe. We create all the governments that are below us with county and city government, and we created the federal government. And all sovereignty rests with the states, except for what the states decided they wanted to either give to the governments below them or to the government above them. And the Constitution is there, and it delineates what powers, what authorities we are giving the federal government. And we still see that same debate today.
Mm-hmm.